I'm glad you've joined us for the next round. What we're doing now is we're looking at Chapter 2 in our American Way of War, a comparison. In this instance, we're comparing two interesting battles or campaigns with two very, very interesting characters leading them. Um, so in the Siege of Yorktown in 1781, we have George Washington in his last battle um, of his life, the end of the American Revolution, the final victory of the American Revolution. On the other side, we're going to be comparing Washington to Napoleon, which I never thought I'd be doing, but it is there where we are. And in this case, it's the Siege of Toulon. So we have Napoleon's first battle paired with Washington's last battle. A really interesting kind of comparison. And again, the comparison vehicle of analysis will be extremely helpful as we look at these two. What's amazing about this with Napoleon, he's barely 20 years old. He's 23, 24 years old at the time of this. Uh, he's literally just out of school, uh, and we'll talk some about that. And so it's really quite extraordinary. Um, but in this battle, his first battle, he literally shows all of the attributes that eventually make him a great general and a great leader of men and an innovative force in military history. And we'll be looking at 6 different attributes that mark his career, and all of them are evidenced in this first battle. So let's take a look at the overview here of what we're talking about here. And here's the siege of Toulon, of Yorktown. And here you see that, and based on the river and the York, and here the fortifications that Cornwallis has put up, and here are the siege lines that the Americans and French will develop. And here, in contrast, is the scene at France, and here's the Mediterranean, and here's the city of Toulon, and this is the inner harbor, outer harbor. So this is the structure of it, and this is where the siege is here, and Napoleon will arrive and address that, and it's really quite interesting. And again, what we're looking at here is the American way of war as defined by Russell Weigley. We talked about this earlier. And here we have some really interesting observations by him. Um, and what Weigley says is what uh, Washington has to do is he has to preserve his army at all costs. Uh, and he must uh, avoid decisive battles if there's a chance that decisive battle will destroy him and the revolution, because they just absolutely cannot afford that to happen. And here we have quotes by comparing quotes by Washington to what Woodley is saying. And so Washington, in a letter to Hancock, uh, talks to the fact that we should avoid all occasions of actions that put to risk uh, unless we're compelled to. And we'll see examples of that as we go through it. One of the examples we talked about in an earlier time we did the American Revolution, and we talked about the Battle of New York. It's called some by the Battle of Long Island, some Battle of Brooklyn. But anyway, it was one of Washington's worst defeats, and uh, he had the wisdom to realize he had to withdraw, and apparently it was very painful for him. Uh, and he is Weigley talking about that this is exactly what Washington needed to know, that he could not let the army be destroyed because that's all there was. Here's another letter to Morris, and we'll talk about Robert Morris a number of times here because he's really important in the actions that we'll discuss. Uh, and here, Washington is talking about, I have to avoid rumors. Uh, ruinous actions to our cause. And here he talks about him, Washington, Weigley talks about having to avoid battle. Uh, and one of the greatest attributes that we'll be looking at with Washington as we look at this is his incredible patience and his ability to wait and be patient, not always an attribute of generals. Here is another quote. Um, Again, he's just saying the same thing in a letter to the President of the Congress. And Weigley is saying, um, not a story of not annihilation. And often America wages wars of annihilation in subsequent years. But here he knows he has to set up with a strategy of attrition and just wear out the British. And he is confident that that's the way. And here's a letter to Patrick Henry. Time, patience, and perseverance will accomplish much. And those are incredible words that characterize what he did in the revolution. And it was one of the ways in which he won the revolution. Um, so these are important points coming out of here. Uh, and here again, uh, especially at the Siege of Toulon, uh, Washington is going to be faced with a lot of hot-headed or red-blooded Americans who want to rush and move rapidly, and Washington has to calm them down, and he has to let them realize that things have to develop in time, and they have to be patient for that time to be expended. And that ability to communicate to his men the nature of what he's doing is also another. Uh, and then here again, and here he talks to the justice of the cause of the revolution, and the fact that they must maintain that cause, and that recognition of the cause and the confidence that that will persevere. Uh, and then Weigley talks to just realizing that eventually the British are going to leave because uh, they're not going to persevere. And as you can see, there are similarities between what Washington is doing here and what Ho Chi Minh did in Vietnam, just waiting out the big guy until he goes. So now we're going to take a look at the background of the Yorktown campaign. And this is a truncated map, but I only want you to see this portion here. We're not interested in the top portion yet. But Cornwallis is moving through the south with some ease and doing great destruction to the revolutionary forces, the Americans that are there. And he gets orders from uh, uh, Clinton in New York, his commander, and tells him to go to Virginia in Yorktown and build the port, the deep water port, so support can come down from New York and they can go. And what Cornwallis wanted to do was to sweep through Virginia and get uh, revolutionary forces in Virginia. But he follows his orders and goes to Yorktown and sits down in the city of Yorktown. And that's a major advantage actually for the Union forces because they're tied down. And so here is Cornwallis, and he is unhappy with these orders to go build a harbor, but he obeys his orders and goes. Now, what's happening at the same time that contributes to this, but quite a while earlier, is Rochambeau is a a French general who was sent by Louis XVI to support the Americans and to help them in this endeavor. And so he arrives in Rhode Island in 1780 with about 6,000 French troops and they're very top drawer troops. They're not secondary level troops, and the French Navy arrives with 7 ships of the line, so a big, and then 2 frigates and a number of transports. Now, this is an important force for the American figures in what goes on. And what's really quite extraordinary about this, and I cannot imagine an American president giving an order like this, but realize what this is saying here. Louis XVI is telling his general to go and put yourself under the command of an American general. Now, Rochambeau has fought in many, many battles in France and has much more military experience at a higher level than Washington does. And what Louis XVI realizes, there'd been a prior instance where there was a struggle between the French and the Americans as to who was going to be commander, and he realized that that was destructive. And here he says to Rochambeau, uh, work with uh, Washington. What is amazing in the correspondence that we have between Washington and Rochambeau is the extraordinary relationship that developed between these two men. Uh, a major explanation of why it was so successful. Now, they meet, they called together a meeting, and Rochambeau's there and Washington's there. Well, Rochambeau's in Rhode Island for quite a while before Washington actually meets him. And they meet, and Knox is there, Washington's chief of artillery, and Louis XVI also sent an engineer, Duportel, and we'll actually talk about him later, but he's another fascinating character. And they meet, and Washington is fixated on the idea of attacking New York and making the next attack at Clinton and his fortifications in Manhattan. And Rochambeau is opposed to it. Knox is, I believe, is opposed to it, as is Duportel. And they really can't convince Washington that that is not the best route. So what happens is they leave there, and the French troops and the Americans uh, form up literally in New Jersey, and they send a recon in force, almost 3,000 to 4,000 men. That's a very substantial reconnaissance. And they cross the Hudson and they attack the British fortifications in the north to see how they are. And they very, very quickly find out that they're very, very robust. And the uh, revolutionary forces, the American forces, are in no shape, and with the British forces, the French forces with them, they're in no shape to contend against um, uh, Clinton. So they have to go to their next command. And so then what they're going to want to do is they're going to want to march down and confront Cornwallis in Virginia. So the French forces came across here, joining with Washington here, and then they're now going to march south to Yorktown. Now, Washington is going to, and Rochambeau is going to be an assistant in this. Is going to want to continue to threaten Clinton in New York City or New York, and think that the major assault is coming there. So he says send 3,500 troops to West Point up on the Hudson. So Clinton thinks that the attack is going to come from there, and he goes to a substantial number of other schemes to deceive Clinton in Washington. And this is kind of interesting because in our first chapter, we looked at Bagration and Overlord, and we talked at some length about the enormous deception campaign run by both the Americans and the Soviets. And here we see Washington doing the same thing. So they lay out pieces of fake news, fake tales that they sent out. They secure boats and do a selection of boats. Apparently, one of the things really works is they build bread ovens, and the bread ovens are big and substantial, and it's supposed to be a telltale to the British that they're setting down for a long stay, and so the boats come in, and the feint. And by the way, again, this bug here indicates that these are all Gemini generated images, and they do a horrible job with spelling. So don't be put off by that. They're actually getting much better, but it's still a continuing problem. So they're they're moving down south, and now the next trouble that uh, Washington faces is really a kind of crazy one. Um, they reach Philadelphia on their way to Yorktown, and the men are almost in rebellion because they haven't been paid. And the other part of that is that Washington has Continentals, the money issued by the Continental Congress, but it's basically worthless. Um, so he's upset that his men are almost in a state of rebellion and wanting to leave and go home. And so he doesn't know what to do. And so what happens, it's really quite extraordinary. Rochambeau, against orders from Louis XVI in this instance, takes the hard currents that he has for his own men in his own operations, and he gives that. I should never use the word give. That I believe they loan it to the Americans. And what's really interesting about this with Rochambeau is he literally is putting his own personal estate up against this. And he knows money is coming from the Caribbean, and it should be there in time, but it's an incredible risk for someone to take at this point in time. And so the men are paid in hard currency, and they're overjoyed by that. And first time they've seen it in quite a while. So it wins the support of the troops, and they now go forward and surprise them. Now we're going to jump to a different place, a different time, but a different uh, element. We haven't spent time looking at Washington's background, but we're going to spend a few minutes talking about Napoleon's background. Number one, because he's just so young. So Napoleon is a Corsican. Um, he's not born in France. He's born in Corsica, and Corsica hasn't been under French control for a long time. I forget exactly how long it is, but it's a period of time when the French are still trying to win uh, their backing and their loyalty and their commitment and their Frenchification, if you want to think such a word exists. Uh, so Napoleon's going to benefit from that. But the other problem is, through his entire life, uh, Napoleon's going to have a Corsican accent, and his Corsican accent is going to set him off and set him apart. It's kind of interesting. We're going to do in our next session the Russian Civil War, and in that we'll close with Stalin going to power. And of course, one of Stalin's problems was he was a Georgian. He was from what ultimately became the Georgian Republic, and he had a very heavy Georgian accent, and that made him stand out. So kind of interesting. But his father's a major influence on him, and they quickly see um, his intelligence, and the father goes to great effort to get Napoleon assigned to and accepted to a boarding school in France. And so he gets to spend time there. What's kind of extraordinary about it, when he graduates from there, he gets an appointment to the École Militaire in Paris. And this is the top draw of military academies in France. And it is a very elite membership. Now, one of the things that happens here and happened at the prior school to some degree, but certainly happens here, is that most of these students are from nobility. Uh, those who are not of nobility are from very, very wealthy families that can afford to send their children here, and it's an appointment of great prestige and honor. Um, so not only does Napoleon stand out because of his accent, but he also stands out that he doesn't know the mannerisms of Paris and the aristocracy. He doesn't have the clothes or the wherewithal to buy the clothes, nor would he necessarily know how to comport himself in those clothes. So Napoleon is isolated. And one of the benefits of that is he becomes a voracious reader, and he reads on history, he reads on military history, he reads on biography. It turns out that he has an aptitude in math, and this is going to help him tremendously with his work in the artillery. And he has a love of geography. Uh, Corsica has an interesting geography in the physical layout of the island. And so I wonder if his experience living in Corsica generated him of his particular interest in geography, because that's going to be a characteristic. All of these things are going to be characteristics that will help him as he develops in his military career. Now, um, he's going to graduate very, very rapidly. He's going to graduate from a 2-year program in 1 year, and he's going to get his rank as a second lieutenant. So kind of interesting. Now, when he graduates, he selects artillery, and this is important as well. Now, number one, artillery is very dependent upon math, very dependent upon some understanding of physics, and what happens and how a shot fires and how it sails through the air, where it's going to land, all the elements of atmosphere that are going to have impact on that. And he brings an asset of ability in math. The other thing that is very, very beneficial for him, uh, if he had gone into infantry or cavalry, even worse, where the aristocracy dominated in that branch, he would have not had much chance of success. But artillery is a meritocracy. It is the most, uh, it's the most branch governed by meritocracy, because you have to have the math skills, you have to have the science skills, and he does. So he's able to bring these, and this is a good matching of what goes on. And then, of course, the other thing that benefits uh, Napoleon is he's coming at an incredible moment of French history. So in July 14th, Bastille Day, the French mobs in Paris stormed the Bastille and capture the Bastille. So tremendous changes are taking place. And then 1793, Louis XVI is beheaded. So you have the Reign of Terror coming in. And this Reign of Terror gives a tremendous, just all of the aristocracy, all of the officers that have been in the military and have built up their status and their position now are at tremendous risk and are hiding. Um, uh, and so the Rochambeau, who will be a great assistance to uh, Washington when we talk about that, he's at risk here, and he's arrested, and I think he's actually scheduled for execution. And Lafayette, who again is a tremendous help to Washington, as many of you know, is also put upon by the actions of the Reign of Terror and the incredible dislocation by the French uh, Revolution. So that this gives Napoleon an opportunity that he would never otherwise have had. Now, another thing that benefits him tremendously is the political influence that comes from a number of accidents. As we've said, his father is very proactive in moving. His father sees his attributes and is very active. His father's a kind of minor nobility. He's appointed affair, and he has good connections. One of those is the military governor of Corsica, and he works as a benefactor of the Bonaparte family, and he's the one that gives the okay to Napoleon going to a boarding school in France, and he recommends Napoleon for the scholarships. So Napoleon is going to benefit enormously. And then another one who is going to be very, very important to Napoleon's rise is a fellow Corsican, and he's actually relatively high up. He's a member of the Committee on Public Safety. This is the key committee uh, during the years of the Terror, uh, and so he is going to be working and assisting Napoleon. And another one is um, Augustin Robespierre. He is the brother of Maximilian, the guy who's leading the terror in Paris. And so he is a representative on mission, just as Salazar was. And that basically means that they're representatives of the power in Paris, and nobody would challenge them. And so when these guys ultimately will urge the promotion and the selection of Napoleon for this key artillery position we'll be talking to soon, no one in the military would dare challenge the representation on mission, a representative on mission. Uh, and another senior representative on mission um, assesses the plan that Napoleon's going to come up with for relieving the siege of, or completing the siege of Toulon. And he recognizes Napoleon's skill, and he moves and is a tremendous political influence. So Napoleon is very blessed in his early years by having really quite unusual connections. All right, we're going to pause this at this point to give you guys a break. And our next section we're going to look at is going to be the section on logistics. So see you in the next part.